Good evening. The news gang is here. Tonight, the basic structure of the BBI appeal. We tell you who said what and who is next. But that's not an eternity clause. Also tonight, the transfer window is fully open. The loans, the permanent transfers, and the spectators. Plus, the president's men and women. Where will the chips fall? On the punchline tonight, the loud report and the silent MPs. Yvonne takes on the rise and near death of the teachers' union. The kicker is on the money and the desperate investors, while the angle tonight is a celebration of the learned bench and the bar.
The exercise of the constituent power was premised upon 4 sequential steps: civic education, public participation, debate, and a referendum as the ultimate process.
We agree with the Superior Court that this was not a popular initiative. It was it was a presidential initiative or executive initiative, which is not provided for in our Constitution, and the attempt subsequently by the initiative's promoters to rope in the people at the tail end of the process to sanitize their illegal and unconstitutional venture must spectacularly fall on the facts and the evidence.
All right, so those are some of the images and the sounds that we heard all day, actually today, and since 2 days ago, the appellants having begun their cases, and today, the respondents beginning to take the podium. Now, Jamila is off tonight, I should say that, and she'll be back next week, hopefully. And Wilson Mushara is on tonight. She's going to be our sign language interpreter. Lady and gentlemen, I should say, what with all the confusion? I mean, Linus, you have to help me here. There's one I couldn't get over. It is Amishi, Amikai, all those things. That one I couldn't figure out how it's pronounced. But either way, a very interesting last couple of days. This was highly anticipated, and so far it hasn't disappointed. I mean, every side putting their best foot forward, as they say. A matter quite live, as it were, in a very literal sense before the court, so not so much we can say about it, but surely there must be something that has stood out. I mean, just looking at how this has played out so far. Linus, what stands out for you in the BBI appeal? This is day 3.
What stands out for me, Joe, is this is a great show for our country. It is a fantastic display of some of our democratic values. And I want to concur with our senior Charles Onyango Obo, who wrote today extensively about what this is in terms of comparison with the rest of the African continent.
It's easy to take it for granted. Eh?
It's very easy to take it for granted. But let me look at it internally as a country. It could not have come at a better time. Such a vibrant debate within court, very highly civilized engagement between it's reason versus reason. It is lawyers versus lawyers, and judges are there seated, and they're being respected by both sides. It doesn't matter where you stand tonight in this BBI case. What we are witnessing at the Court of Appeal is a very, very good show for the country. And when I say it doesn't come at a better time, look at our political environment. Potentially, every institution would be dead today, or quiet, or submissive, or basically on a break, if the judiciary did not function this way. But I want to spread the credits around and say, the civil society, which is basically driven the petition that is being appealed against today, is very wisely chose to go the court route at a time when we don't have a vibrant opposition. because some of these debates would have taken place in Parliament. But you know very well the shape of Parliament, the shape of the both houses, that is the National Assembly and the Senate, cannot really allow this kind of discussion right now. It is lopsided. We have an environment in which the opposition and the government, there is no demarcation. They are all together. What has come in aid of our democracy today is this vibrant show by the lawyers in court. What else stood out, Joe, for me, is obviously the meaning of all this. This is a legal space. It's a bit strict in terms of how much you can contribute. It is a lawyer's space, and not just all lawyers, it's certain type of lawyers. And it fills a gap that the political environment cannot. You know, in the old days, you can demonstrate about things. But who would demonstrate about basic structure? You know, you can't, it's a bit complicated. Which is why we have to look at this story that started from the High Court and coming to the Court of Appeal and possibly ending up in the Supreme Court. It is a very, very interesting time. Lastly, the judges, they are, in a way, also on trial. And one of the lawyers, I think it was Ntiankolu Mudomi, did a PowerPoint presentation and telling them what a decision, of course he is for the petitioners that won big in the High Court, and he was telling them what it would mean to overturn this decision. It would mean, in his view, taking the country back. It would actually amount to what used to happen to the first constitution that was amended 38 times. Yeah. And for me, a number of lawyers also stood out, especially the younger generation that is emerging.
Oh, they're amazing. I mean, like...
they are totally amazing. Yeah. And I must celebrate also the return of Professor Kindiki. Yeah. Because we have to be frank on these things. Something happens to...
Yeah, like you call it return, like you had lost it.
Yes, we had...
I mean, there's a sense in which we lose these people to politics.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is the Professor Kindiki Kithure of the 2010 and pre-2010 Constitution. Yep. And so...
even there was some brilliant displays too at the ICC. I mean, when he's in that space, he's a different person.
Very different person. And this is the person we knew, you know, when he's started hitting the public spaces. Not so much the deputy speaker of the Senate that we saw there that was completely different. I mean, it was very refreshing to see Professor Kindiki functioning in the way that we knew him.
Yep. Okay, Yvonne?
Let me just pick it up from, you know, the people who were happy to see. It was good to see Martha Karua back, you know, in that setting as well. And for me, I think there were just a couple of breakout stars, like you mentioned. Esther Angawa, you know, brilliant and sharp, regardless of whether or not you agree with her arguments or, you know, which side she stands on the matter. I thought that was interesting. We saw Morara Omoke, and then there was a young lady...
Eric Gumbo yesterday.
Morara Omoke even going as far as to be sure that the judges get his name right.
Yes.
Yeah. It's not Mora, no. It is Morara, my lord.
And you know, it's a big difference.
It is, certainly.
In that case, yes.
And, you know, we've also seen, you know, regardless of, there have been troubles in LSK and, you know, with the presidency around that, but we saw Nelson Havi in his element, you know, in a court of law, presenting his case. There was a young lady today, Jemtai, was that
Gerono,
yes.
Gerono,
yeah, you know, so it's that's what it is for me. It's 7 judges, 60 lawyers, 4 days of hearing, 5 appeals have been filed, 15 grounds for appeal, and it seems like, you know, in a sense, a battle of David versus Goliath. So you've got, you know, Goliath, which is the big-time lawyers who are on the side of the appellants. And then you've got the younger ones and also the ones who are activist, if you like, pro bono lawyers who are, you know, now the respondents, who are the petitioners, you know, at the High Court. And this is just reminiscent of 2013 and 2017. And I dare say what happens in the court with this case, regardless of which way it goes, will be as momentous in this country as the cases we saw before the Supreme Court in 2013 and in 2017 with the presidential election petitions that were there. But then it's also good to see, you know, these lawyers who are now, you know, on different sides. So now, you know, when you compare to some of those big cases, you know, you have President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga on one side, you know, in a court of law, when in 2017 they were on completely opposite sides.
Quite interesting.
Quite
I mean,
interesting.
Yesterday, actually, Professor Githu Muigai, I think, made a joke about it, about James Orengo, that, you know, James Orengo, who we haven't been on the same side in court for the last 20 years, I think he said.
And now they're on the same side.
Yeah.
Even the ones who are representing the Attorney General were actually on opposing sides in the 2017 petition, and now, you know, find themselves on the same side. And I think for me, some of the key issues will be around that the judges have to decide the person that is the president, and, you know, what are his rights and roles and responsibilities under the Constitution. You know, is he an initiator of a process, or is he merely a participant in it? The issue again of process coming out. When does the process of, or particularly this one, of amending the Constitution begin? Did it begin with the handshake in 2018, or did it begin at the moment of signature collection? Those are some of the issues that the judges are going to have to grapple with. And one last thing, even in this case, the judges are also engaging, you know, quite robustly with the litigants. You know, Justice Gatembu Kairu and Justice Patrick Kiage to yours. Yes, they're asking questions and they're, you know, seeking clarifications. So, I mean, this is a beautiful moment to watch. Regardless of where you stand on the issue and how this ends up. And I certainly see, like we've been saying, that this will head to the Supreme Court one way or the other.
Yeah, I also look at it in the context of, this is what we ought to do when we disagree. If there is a dispute of any nature, take it to the courts and respect the courts that you're taking the dispute to, in such a way that regardless of the outcome, you will be assured that justice has not only been done, but seen to be done. The 3 days that we've followed the proceedings, either way, whichever way it goes, you will feel that the lawyers representing various sides put their best foot forward. The judges were engaging. What will be interesting now is to see the reasoning behind the decision by the judges. If they decide that reggae stops, why should it continue to stop? If they decide that reggae is back, so what would be the reasons for reggae is back? Whichever way, the public has engaged and consumed the content from the lawyers. Even those who are probably disinterested in the process at the High Court are now interested in what is happening at the Court of Appeal. And whichever way the decision goes, people will say, but I remember lawyer so-and-so said this, lawyer so-and-so rebutted that argument in this way. I remember Judge so-and-so asking this question in form of a clarification or something like that. But from where I followed the proceedings, I thought the three major issues that came up and that would determine whichever way the decision will be is, number one, the basic structure doctrine. What is amendable in the Constitution and what is not amendable in the Constitution. Number two, who is the promoter of the popular initiative that is the Building Bridges initiative pushed to amend the Constitution. If it is the president, can he? If it is not the president and it is Dennis Waweru and Junet Mohammed, is this the legal argument versus the political argument? And number three, IABC, the composition. I had questions about constitution of IABC and quorum.
Yeah, there was also even composition.
Composition and quorum. So very interesting things to see. And I think over and above that, I think it is a good opportunity for Kenyans to see what respect for institutions mean. I hope the same can be extended to IABC, to Parliament, to all government agencies and institutions, such that eventually when you trust a process to a certain institution, you are able to see the outcome, and that outcome respected by all.
And that's so interesting. And I think I picked something, Yvonne, you were talking about, and I think Linus also mentioned, about the engagement of the judges. I mean, you can tell that they're listening. You know, you can't ask those questions if you're not following the twists and turns there. And I think that's really great, because it means that the judges are seized of this matter, as they like to say, that they're actually not just
strangers.
Kind of struggling through. They actually have consumed all the submissions, they follow this case, and that's something that is really good, because then it means that the judges are listening to what the various parties there are saying. But the other thing I think which I find interesting, I think that this case, all the way from the court, the High Court, and now, it's forcing us as citizens to actually listen to some of the sort of more philosophical and theoretical underpinnings of what we call the law today. I mean, it is forcing us to stretch the boundaries of how we understand the Constitution that we have, and that there are actually some very deep sort of issues that informed the rights we have, the way the Constitution is written, why the Constitution is written the way it's written, and that sort of thing. And I believe that whatever happens here, there is a whole, what lawyers like to call jurisprudence. There's a way of thinking about the law, even in this country, that will emerge out of this case, that will, I think, inform a lot of cases going forward. I mean, already even the High Court judgment, which is the subject matter here, is already being discussed in very many different places all around the world. But finally, I think the other thing which is commendable. I mean, it is important to say this, and in the context of what we were saying, that these are not things that happen everywhere around the world. That actually they are very mighty, the high and mighty that we talk about in this country, that are actually in there. That we have actually the President of the Republic, for example, who's subjecting himself to the court and saying, hey, you know what, I don't like what the High Court said, and I'm here so that you can adjudicate. And I think that's really a good sign, especially in a country where we've had many people complain about the executive not obeying orders from the courts and everything. So I think the fact that the executive in its entirety would say, subjecting itself to the due process of the law and saying, hey, you know what, that decision by the High Court was not fair. I feel it wasn't because of ABCD and the President sending his lawyers there. I think that is a really good thing. So in sum, I think this, as some people have mentioned around the table, is a great display for our country. Actually, I believe that the world watching this is actually saying there is something over there in Kenya.
And more fundamentally, Joe, the decision that will come from the judges will also give some sense of direction, actually proper direction in terms of how to amend the Constitution using popular initiative, because this Constitution is open to amendments now and in the future. If this is the document that we'll have for many years to come, whenever an opportunity arises to amend the Constitution, which is the proper formula, which is the proper route, which is the process to follow in amending the Constitution, either by parliamentary initiative or by popular initiative, such that everybody will be aware this is the first step followed by this step, because you would see there's some, I don't know whether to call it confusion, but there are people who had various views on how to amend the Constitution. Who can amend the Constitution? When can it be amended? What can be amended? I think this offers an opportunity to the country to now be clear, satisfied and certain, even if the matter goes to the Supreme Court, for that sense of direction with finality, that in future, should anyone intend or think of amending the Constitution, this is the route to go.
You see, there is a reason why political parties or governments fight for the control of the judiciary, because certain decisions are important in terms of taking or affecting your policy directions, which is why in the US you see it's really a big deal who sits in the Supreme Court. And the standard measure has always been conservative versus liberal. And there is the case of Roe v. Wade, which is always a point of contestation to see if there'll be enough conservative judges that will overturn the decision. I give this backdrop because when it comes to constitution as well, it's not cast in stone. Interpretations can come in different ways from judges. And what this calls for is good sportsmanship on the part of those who go to court to find or to seek constitutional interpretation, and those who will be on the opposite side. Because without it, then we will have serious contestations that sometimes actually flow out to the streets. When you look at the debate or the proceedings for the last 2 days, you actually do not find any space for the kind of aggressive political talk that preceded this case. It's not a matter of life and death. You can win, you can lose. So not a single lawyer was wagging their fingers today the way politicians do, whether it's those appealing or those who are responding. So I think there's some learning, especially by the executive, that should actually not be missed through this process. The executive missed the 2017 moment, by resorting to things like calling judges wakora and basically for the last 4 years, fighting the judiciary over a decision that could actually be good for the country. There's something that is comparable that is going on in the case today. Just like 2017, it looks like decisions will be about process. Procedure. How did you arrive here? Yeah. In 2017, the Supreme Court never asked anybody whether you won or lost the election. Yeah. They're just asking, by the way, these numbers here, how did we get them? This number of votes, how are they here? And I can see the same trend. And Joe, you pointed out correctly that judges are acting in a more inquisitorial way than the traditional way of just listening to the parties and making a decision. They're asking questions. And here is something else the appellants and the petitioners ought to understand. Judges are Kenyans. They live here. They know what goes on. They consume the news that we all consume. They know when there's a launch at Bomas and all that. So, if a decision goes against you like it did with the High Court, these guys did not just land from Mars and then you are feeding them empty with new information. Not at all. They're part of our society. They know what goes on, which is where I'm talking of the need for good sportsmanship and also just a change of attitude, especially within the executive and even legislature, in terms of how you relate to these arms of government. Just look at that show there. Throw any politician there. Throw them. The rally guys. How will they do in that court? How will they perform when confronted with the issue of basic structure? This is a wing of government, an arm of government that deals with a very specialized area. They have to go back and think about what they've heard and determine this matter. We really hope that there'll be the toning down of political rhetoric, especially, regardless the direction this court case will take.
And as you rightly point out, Linus, I know we have to move on. The time we have allocated for this show is not amendable. So we can so if you look at the whole thing of how those lawyers are very civil. They are on opposite sides. This is called adversarial, but you don't feel that, this is life and death. They actually engage on the basis of the facts and the law as they interpret them based on what their clients the client is seeking to do in that court. So in a sense, I think it's a good show that ought to be emulated, that, those people have diametrically opposed views in that court, but you don't get the sense, because out here, when people have the slightest of differences of opinion, all hell breaks loose. I mean, that's why people go to rallies and they hurl insults at each other and everything. And here, people who are disagreeing on very fundamental things about the supreme document that governs how we live, but they are taking it in their stride. And I think that's a really a great lesson there that we can pick as we go forward. I wanted us to move quickly.
But the only unfortunate thing, Joe, is that what you saw in the courts and the civility and the decorum that you see is not necessarily what the political world is made of. It works very differently. When people disagree, they disagree fully and sometimes very viciously.
But we also know,
which ought not to be the case.
We also know it's a show because sometimes they go and take tea after.
Which ought not to be the case. Maybe progressively, it will be more politics of policies, ideas and ideals as opposed to personality. The moment you move to issues, people will now engage on issues. But as long as it will be about so-and-so versus so-and-so, this team that is made up of these guys from this area and these guys from this area, it will always be combative. But more fundamentally, when you have an independent judiciary, as the push has been, it is also a question of accountability. What you saw and what I thought the judges were doing is that process of accountability. When they are asking questions, they're also taking notes because they are also aware that Kenyans are also watching and they're taking notes. So ultimately, whichever decision will be made, independently, yes, but in an accountable manner that people at the end of the day will say, by the way, those judges have a point.
I guess which is why the fact that this is all happening right in front of our eyes publicly is part of that. Linus, yes.
No, just a quick one. I mean, the judiciary derives its authority from its decisions being respected. Just that. You know, if it's a court order, respect it. If it's a decision by the 5 judges or 7 judge bench, if it's respected, that's the beginning of the authority of the judiciary.
All right, I think we have lots to discuss, but we need to take a short break. News Gang will be right back.
Are you asking that we are John?